you're trying to tell me that this website is not open to U.S. citizens or residents. So you're trying to tell me that the investors of Real Token are allegedly not even of the country of the United States. And so all of these 400 plus properties that are owned in the city of Detroit are basically from investment from outside the country, which is another gray area when it comes to cryptocurrencies and tokenization, where you, in theory, are opening up the ability to allow for anybody to invest in whatever said token you're creating, whatever asset you're tokenizing. And real estate, as we can see here, is no exception. What's going on, folks? Eddie Carrington, mayor of Flux City. Today we are talking about blockchain and real estate. This is something that intrigues me as a person who has been in the startup realm, and I tried a handful of startups, one being a blockchain centered retirement plan that we were thinking through, me and a business partner of mine. Shout out to Jerry. He actually introduced me to Bitcoin and Litecoin really early on. I would call him an OG in the crypto space, but the concept of fractionizing ownership or fractional ownership in real estate is, in theory, really, really intriguing to me, especially from a tokenization standpoint, and especially from the ability to boil down fractional ownership all the way down to your single family properties, which blockchain could provide this flexibility of ownership if done right. But once again, in theory, it sounds good. In reality, well, that's another story. There have been a number of startups that have tried their hand at this tokenization approach to, or fractional ownership approach to real estate from a smaller scale, but a lot of them have failed. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a few examples that weren't successful and think through why that might have been the case.
This is New York City's East Village, and I'm standing in front of 13 East and West. In 2018, it was Manhattan's first property to try a new approach to ownership. Fractions of the condo tokenized on a blockchain. The effort was put together by companies Propeller and Fluidity as an alternative way to finance the development. The move was lauded by the Web3 industry as a way to take the technology mainstream, but the project ultimately failed.
So here's Propeller, a creation management and servicing platform for digitally held assets. Propeller empowers firms to structure, raise, and service capital for discrete and pooled transactions. The platform also provides eligible investors with blockchain-based distributed ledger as well as traditional book entry investments. So once again, a public blockchain option where you're able to potentially tokenize the equity in a particular asset and sell them or sell that equity in the form of tokens to essentially anybody. But Propeller provides eligible accredited investors. Okay, well, I take anybody back because it looks like they still were limited by the SEC rules. But Propeller provides eligible accredited investors with the ability to use fiat and digital currencies to facilitate and take custody of certain investments through the use of blockchain and distributed ledger technology. So it looks like they also have not updated their copyright on this site since 2019. So I'm going to assume that they went out of business. But the funny thing about these types of concepts, and I don't know if this is funny or not, but I did have a bit of experience on the startup side. Me and a good friend of mine, GR Webby, as I mentioned earlier in this video, we tried our hand at a few startup concepts, and we understand what it takes to kind of get to a point where you're servicing customers, especially when it comes to an SEC regulated industry such as what these entities were doing. Because one of our second startup was focused around retirement and crypto and being able to basically set up a retirement plan that is a little bit unique than what you're typically available to do. In order for them to get to market, they probably raised millions of dollars in order to get to a point where they were able to have the infrastructure to service their clientele and to get to a point where they were offering an actual offering of tokens for the properties that this gentleman is discussing in this video.
The key benefits of investing in fractional real estate are you don't need the $100,000, the $200,000, the $300,000 to get started in it.
This can take form in concepts like tokenized rental properties. Investors are able to spend as little as around $50 for one fraction of a given property. The properties are owned by an LLC, which is governed by a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO. This means that all investors get to vote on key issues, like selecting a property manager.
Essentially, any decision to operate or manage the property is decided collectively by the group voting.
In theory, it makes sense. And it seems like this would be a seamless approach to not only investing, but also decision making and management. But the decentralized autonomous entity or organization, or DAO, that's a scenario where there could be some fraudulent activity, even though you'd have rules baked in place to kind of avoid scenarios where somebody who has a majority of the tokens of this property is not able to control all of the decisions based off of the number of shares that they own. But very complex structure when you're adding a DAO on top of an LLC. So if somebody were to sue the LLC, which is kind of encapsulated in this DAO, who's actually going to be responsible, right? Who's the guarantor? And there's always eventually somebody that it's tied to. But in theory, this DAO is kind of operating as its own entity. Very complex. There are a number of challenges when it comes to these types of structures legally, which could unwind in a number of ways.
But it's not just about the investors. Real people live in these properties, and it might be too early to tell how tokenization will affect communities.
I've interviewed a couple of people who are investors with one fractionalized real estate investment platform, and they all suggested to me that the properties were in what they called lower class neighborhoods, or that the assets were of low quality, that there were a lot of evictions.
And that right there is a shame. These startups and financial institutions continuously prey on areas that aren't going to, in theory, push back on these concepts that aren't really tested and fleshed out. And so we run into scenarios like what we're going to eventually discuss today, where the community is not happy. The city is not happy. And the neighbors that live next to properties similar to what we're seeing on this screen are pissed off. These are individuals that are sick and tired of people experimenting within their community. And in this scenario that we're going to discuss today, they're actually doing something about it.
Because sometimes it's very small amounts of money that are involved. There's a sense to kind of think about it as almost like play or learning by doing. It's adding another layer of abstraction or opacity in between tenants and the people who actually own and benefit from the ownership of those properties.
With that said, we have an example of which where I'd like to highlight here in the city of Detroit. There's a company called Real Token that has tokenized ownership of close to 400 properties here in the city of Detroit. Let's check to see how they're doing.
After months of complaints, the city of Detroit wins a major legal protection for hundreds of tenants living in blighted properties. CBS News Detroit's Elaine Rojas Castillo is getting answers at the Coleman Young Municipal Building for those affected.
Yolanda Williams and her family have lived at this house on Abington Street on Detroit's west side for nearly 50 years.
This is the house that I've only known. This is my neighborhood.
Shout out to Miss Williams and her mother and her family living in this community for 50 plus years. And although they're renters, these are individuals that make up these neighborhoods that in turn Real Token comes in and tries to allegedly take advantage of. And so this is unfortunate, where you have real people being impacted by these alleged bad actors that are not doing the city any favors.
Their home is one of hundreds that are included in a sweeping lawsuit filed by the city of Detroit against Real Token LLC, a cryptocurrency-based real estate platform. The lawsuit targets more than 400 homes across the city, citing the company's numerous code violations and unsafe living conditions. Detroit Corporate Counsel Conrad Mallett says the company uses a network of 165 different LLC groups to avoid any kind of accountability or recourse for their tenants.
So I would assume that all of the 165 LLCs are nestled into the DAO that this organization in turn allows for the investors to use in order to make decisions and to see their returns and things of that nature, but I could be wrong.
These properties are in such a degraded state that there's no way that interested owners, no matter whom they farmed out the responsibility, would not know that their tenants are living in substandard housing.
On Wednesdays,
That's a guy that cares. You can tell that this is an individual that really cares about his role with the city and the tenants of these homes. And from my understanding, they did a decent amount of research on Real Token and really made sure that before they kind of came up with their accusations of this entity, they did their due diligence. They talked to their legal department and they really discussed all of the issues with the tenants of these 400 properties, reached out to the owners, and this is the outcome. They're pissed. As a city, they're pissed. As a tenant, they're pissed. And potentially as investors, the investors that bought tokens and shares of these properties, they can't be happy as well, because this means that the investment that they're putting their money into isn't necessarily performing at a quality that they potentially were promised before they actually invested their money and their tokens to begin with.
city officials announced major legal protections for those residents by safely withholding their future rent payments.
They need to not pay their rent in August to Real Token. They need to put their August rent into an escrow account.
This
Wow. So the city is directing the tenants to not even pay their rent. And there's something to be said about a landlord-friendly city versus a tenant-friendly city. And I would say that Detroit's more of a tenant-friendly city. And from a landlord's perspective, in general, there are certain things that I get frustrated with when it comes to dealing with tenants and working with the city to potentially get a tenant that is not paying their rent out of a unit of mine. But in this scenario, I 100% agree with the stance that the city of Detroit is taking against Real Token for their alleged mishandling of these 400 properties.
temporary restraining order stops Real Token from collecting rent from any of its impacted tenants until those buildings are repaired and a certificate of compliance is issued to each of them.
So they are giving Real Token an opportunity to fix their issues, right? Go in, repair what you need to repair in order for you to be able to collect rent again.
Mallett says this move is designed to push the company to finally address the nearly $500,000 in violations as soon as possible.
$500,000 in violations? That's insane. That is insane. This is what comes up when you Google Real Token. Real Token can refer to Realty, a digital real estate platform where tokens represent ownership and properties. Let's go ahead and check out this site. Wow. So you're trying to tell me that this website is not open to U.S. citizens or residents. So you're trying to tell me that the investors of Real Token are allegedly not even of the country of the United States. And so all of these 400 plus properties that are owned in the city of Detroit are basically from investment from outside the country, which is another gray area when it comes to cryptocurrencies and tokenization, where you, in theory, are opening up the ability to allow for anybody to invest in whatever said token you're creating, whatever asset you're tokenizing. And real estate, as we can see here, is no exception. So imagine these properties that we live next to here in the city of Detroit, not even owned by Detroiters. And so that's where it can get a little iffy, right? And the crazy part about this is I can't go to the Real Token website and directly buy into tokens or equity of these properties in the city of Detroit as easy as you would think. So who actually owns these homes? Who actually owns these 400 properties in the city of Detroit that Real Token is managing allegedly pretty poorly? We need answers. This next video is from the city of Detroit, and they're highlighting the wins that they were able to get over this investment firm that is tokenizing all of these properties here in the city, but not necessarily providing the type of living experience that you would expect a landlord provide its tenants. So let's check it out.
Today is a day that I'm going to tell you I've been waiting for a long time. I had an opportunity to tour some of the homes in the neighborhood that are owned by Real Token, and first when I started hearing about what was going on, I was curious. By the time I got inside of these homes, I was furious. We're talking about roofs that are leaking, poor sewage leaking in the basement. We have standing water as well in many of the locations.
Unbelievable for these individuals, for this organization to come to the city of Detroit to prey on the tenants here, buy these properties, thinking that they can get away with these types of living conditions, and allegedly in turn be slumlords here in the city of Detroit, disrespecting our residents and making it unsafe and dangerous even for a lot of these individuals that need a roof over their head and are counting on this entity to provide a safe space for them to in turn find themselves in a predicament where they potentially have black mold, they got standing water, sewage, leaky roofs, furnaces not working, hot water tanks not providing hot water. Just so many different issues that I've allegedly heard Real Token having with the properties that they're managing. And so therefore this is a shame. This is a shame for them to come and do that here in the great city of Detroit.
408 properties, and not one of them has a certification of compliance. Not one. It is very clear that the city of Detroit does not support this type of behavior by any means at all. And what we're seeing today is not just disrespect, it is dangerous. But that stops again today.
I raised this issue with Corporation Counsel in February of 2025. At that time, I inquired about the legal options available to address the troubling issues and business practices of this company.
Look at all those properties they
residents
own
were being
throughout the
exploited.
city. Crazy.
Many of them single mothers left to live in unsafe and unhealthy conditions. Yet their rent is still being collected. These are not isolated incidents. We're talking about over 400 properties across our neighborhoods. I refuse to let Detroit be used as a test lab.
Once again, shout out to the city of Detroit for putting a stop to this alleged disrespect from this entity that is literally using the city of Detroit as a testing ground to prove their hypothesis. And we're not having it. We're not having it as a people, as a city, and this is as a culture. This is just wrong. And I am really glad that the city is giving this entity such a hard time. But in theory, back to the concept of using blockchain for fractional ownership, it makes sense, right? It makes sense, but in reality, it's really, really hard to execute this format in a way that benefits the community, benefits the tenants that live in these properties, and benefits even the investors of these tokens and fractional ownership of real estate, where a lot can go wrong as opposed to things just working and smoothly going the way you want it to go, right? So once again, I really appreciate you chiming in, listening to this video. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.